imagine being born into slavery. No freedom, no rights, no control over your own body. Imagine your master breaking your leg on purpose, just because he could. And imagine calmly saying to him, "I told you it would break." Most people would scream, would cry, would be consumed by rage and hatred. But this man stayed calm, because he had discovered something more powerful than freedom. He had discovered that no one could control his mind. Not his master, not Rome, not even the emperor. His body was enslaved, but his mind was free. And that inner freedom would make him one of the most important teachers in all of human history. His name was Epictetus, and this is his story. My name is Eternal Echoes, and for the next 40 minutes, I'm going to take you through the complete life of a man who was born with nothing, suffered everything, and became the teacher of emperors. From slavery to freedom, from broken body to unbreakable mind, from powerlessness to the most powerful philosophy ever created. Because Epictetus proved something that changed the world. He proved that external circumstances have no power over your inner peace, that you can be a slave and still be free, that you can lose everything and still have everything that matters. And the lessons he taught, born from unimaginable suffering, are more relevant today than they were 2,000 years ago. So let us begin. Hierapolis, Phrygia, around 50 AD. A child is born into slavery. We do not know his real name, because slaves did not have names. They had labels. And his label was Epictetus, which in Greek means acquired one. Property, an object owned by someone else. This was his beginning. Born into a world where he had no say over anything, where he would be, what he would do, who he would serve, whether he would live or die. Everything was decided by others. And for most people born into slavery, this was their entire life. A life of obedience, of submission, of accepting that they were less than human. But Epictetus was different. Even as a child, he understood something that most free people never understand, that there are two types of control in this world. Things you can control, and things you cannot. You cannot control being born a slave. But you can control how you respond to being a slave. You cannot control what others do to your body, but you can control what happens in your mind. And this simple distinction, learned in childhood, would become the foundation of everything he would teach. As a young slave, Epictetus was brought to Rome, the greatest city in the world, the center of power, wealth, and civilization. But for a slave, Rome was just a bigger cage. He was owned by Epictetus, a wealthy freedman who served as secretary unto the Emperor Nero. Epictetus was a cruel master, the kind of man who enjoyed having power over others, who took pleasure in reminding slaves of their place. And one day, Epictetus was twisting Epictetus's leg, perhaps as punishment, perhaps just for amusement. And as the pressure increased, as the pain became unbearable, Epictetus said something that would be remembered for 2,000 years. He said, calmly, without anger, without fear, "You are going to break my leg." Epictetus ignored him and kept twisting. And the leg broke. Snap! The bone shattered. And Epictetus, still calm, looked at his master and said, "I told you it would break." No screaming. No begging. No rage. Just a simple statement of fact. Because Epictetus had already understood the most important truth of Stoicism. You cannot control what others do to you, but you can always control your response. His master could break his leg, but he could not break his mind. His master could own his body, but he could not own his thoughts. And in that moment, in the middle of unimaginable pain, Epictetus was more free than his master would ever be. Because his master was enslaved by his own cruelty, by his need to dominate, by his inability to control his own impulses, But Epictetus was free. Free in the only way that matters, in his mind. That broken leg would never fully heal. Epictetus would walk with a limp for the rest of his life, a permanent reminder of what had been done to him. But he never complained about it, never spoke of it with bitterness, because he knew that complaining would not fix his leg. It would only break his peace. And peace was the one thing no one could take from him. As the years passed, something extraordinary happened. Epictetus began studying philosophy. How a slave had access to philosophy, we do not know for certain. Perhaps his master allowed it. Perhaps he studied in secret. But somehow, Epictetus found his way to the teachings of Stoicism. He studied under Musonius Rufus, one of the great Stoic teachers of that era. And what he learned transformed everything. Stoicism taught that there are only a few things in your control: your thoughts, your judgments, your responses, your character. Everything else, your body, your reputation, your possessions, your circumstances, is outside your control, and therefore should not be the source of your happiness or suffering. For a free person, this is a powerful idea. For a slave, this is liberation. Because if your happiness depends on external things, you are always at the mercy of others. But if your happiness depends only on your mind, you are free, even in chains. And Epictetus embraced this with every fiber of his being. He saw that his master, for all his wealth and power, was not free. He was enslaved by his desires, his anger, his need for control. But Epictetus, who owned nothing, was free, because he had mastered himself. Years passed. The Emperor Nero died. The empire changed hands. And at some point, in a way we do not fully understand, Epictetus was freed. Perhaps his master freed him. Perhaps he bought his freedom. Perhaps the chaos of the times allowed him to escape. But by around 68 AD, Epictetus was no longer property. He was a free man. And what did he do with his freedom? He became a teacher, not of the wealthy, not of the elite, but of anyone who wanted to learn. He opened a school in Rome, and people came from all over the empire to study with him, because Epictetus taught something that no one else could teach. He taught how to be free when everything is taken from you, how to find peace when the world is chaos, how to stay calm when you have every reason to break. He taught from experience. Every lesson was earned through suffering. Every principle was tested in the crucible of slavery, and people could feel the truth in his words. Because these were not academic theories. These were survival tools, the weapons he had used to survive slavery. And now, he was giving them to anyone who would listen. His school grew. His reputation spread. And among his students were some of the most important people in Rome: senators, politicians, soldiers. Even the future Emperor Hadrian may have attended his lectures. But Epictetus treated everyone the same, because Stoicism teaches that all people are equal, not in circumstance, but in capacity. A slave has the same capacity for virtue as an emperor. A poor person has the same capacity for wisdom as a rich person, because virtue and wisdom are internal. And no one can give them to you or take them from you. You must choose them. For about 25 years, Epictetus taught in Rome, training minds, freeing souls, changing lives. But then, in 93 AD, everything changed. The Emperor Domitian, paranoid and cruel, expelled all philosophers from Rome. Epictetus had to leave. After building a life, after establishing a school, after finally having stability, he was forced out. Again, most people would be devastated. But Epictetus understood something fundamental. External circumstances are temporary. Cities rise and fall. Empires come and go. But your character is permanent. You take it with you wherever you go. So Epictetus simply moved. He relocated to Nicopolis, a city in northwestern Greece. And there, he started again. A new school, a new community. And if anything, his teaching became even more powerful, because he had proven, once again, that you can lose everything external and still have everything that matters. In Nicopolis, Epictetus lived simply. He owned almost nothing. A straw bed, a lamp, simple clothing. He once joked that thieves could steal his belongings, but they could never steal his ability to live without them. And one night, thieves did come. They stole his iron lamp. The next day, Epictetus replaced it with an earthen lamp. And he said, "Tomorrow I will have only what a thief can afford to take. No anger, no complaint, just acceptance and adaptation." Because he knew that holding on to things only makes you vulnerable. The less you need, the less you can lose. And the less you can lose, the more free you are. Epictetus never married. He had no children of his own. But late in life, he adopted a child who was going to be left to die. Because he believed that caring for others was a fundamental human duty. Not because it benefits you, but because it is right. He lived this way for the rest of his life. Teaching, writing nothing himself, but his students wrote everything down. And those teachings, collected into 2 books, the Discourses and the Enchiridion, became some of the most important texts in Western philosophy. Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome, carried the Enchiridion with him everywhere. It was his guide, his anchor, his daily practice. And he was not alone. For 2,000 years, people have turned to Epictetus in their darkest moments. Slaves seeking freedom, soldiers seeking courage, prisoners seeking peace. Anyone who has ever felt powerless has found power in his words, because Epictetus proved that power is not about controlling others. It is about controlling yourself. Epictetus died around 135 AD. We do not know exactly how. We do not know where he was buried, because those details, he would say, are not in our control, and therefore do not matter. What matters is what he left behind. A philosophy of radical freedom. A path to peace that no one can block. A reminder that we are always more powerful than we think. So let me share with you now the 12 most important lessons from the life of Epictetus. Lessons that changed the world and can change your life. Lesson 1. Some things are in your control and others are not. This is the foundation of everything Epictetus taught. In our control are our thoughts, our desires, our responses, our character. Not in our control are our bodies, our reputations, what others say and do, and external events. All suffering comes from confusing these 2 categories. When you try to control what you cannot control, you suffer. When you focus on what you can control, you find peace. Ask yourself right now, what am I trying to control that I cannot control? And let it go. Lesson 2. Freedom is not the absence of chains, but the mastery of self. Epictetus was enslaved for most of his early life. But he was freer than his master, because his master was controlled by his desires and impulses. But Epictetus controlled his own mind. You are not free because you have choices. You are free because you have self-control. Lesson 3. How you respond to what happens matters more than what happens. Your master breaks your leg. You are exiled from Rome. Thieves steal your lamp. These things happen. You cannot stop them. But you choose your response, and your response determines whether you suffer or stay at peace. Lesson 4. Do not demand that things happen as you wish. Wish that they happen as they do. This is acceptance, not passive resignation, but active alignment with reality. When you stop fighting what is, you find peace. Lesson 5. You are not your circumstances. Epictetus was a slave, but that was his circumstance, not his identity. You might be poor, sick, alone, rejected, but those are circumstances, not who you are. Who you are is determined by your character, and no one can take that from you. Lesson 6. Philosophy is not about reading, it is about practice. Epictetus did not write philosophy. He lived it. He practiced it every single day. In slavery, in exile, in poverty. Do not just learn Stoicism. Practice it. Lesson 7. Complaining changes nothing except your peace. Epictetus walked with a limp his entire life. He could have complained every day. It would not have fixed his leg. It would only have broken his peace. What are you complaining about that you cannot change? Stop. Lesson 8. Want what you have. Most people suffer because they want what they do not have. But Epictetus taught the opposite. Want what you already have. Appreciate it. And when it is taken away, accept that too. Lesson 9. Your opinion of things determines your experience of things. It is not things that disturb people, but their judgments about things. Slavery is neither good nor bad. Your judgment makes it so. Change your judgment. Change your experience. Lesson 10. Caring for others is not optional, it is essential. Epictetus adopted a child who was going to die, because humans have a duty to care for each other. Not when it is convenient. Always. Lesson 11. The obstacle is training. Everything that happens to you is training. Slavery trained Epictetus in patience. Exile trained him in adaptability. Pain trained him in resilience. What is your current obstacle training you in? Lesson 12. You always have the power to choose. Even in slavery, Epictetus chose his thoughts. Even with a broken leg, he chose his response. Even in exile, he chose to start again. You always have choice. Not over what happens, but over who you become because of it. So here is the question I want to leave you with. Epictetus was born into slavery. Had his leg broken by his master. Was exiled from Rome. Owned nothing. And yet he was free. More free than emperors. More free than kings. More free than anyone who has ever lived enslaved by their desires. What is enslaving you right now? What external thing do you think you need to be happy? What circumstance are you blaming for your suffering? Whatever it is, Epictetus would tell you the same thing he told himself every day. It is not in your control, so let it go. Focus on what you can control. Your mind, your character, your response. And in that focus, you will find the only freedom that matters. The freedom that no one can take away. If this story moved you, if the life of Epictetus taught you something, subscribe to Eternal Echoes. Because every week, I share the ancient wisdom that transforms modern lives. And comment below. Tell me honestly, which lesson from Epictetus do you need the most right now? The slave who became free is watching. And so is your destiny.